Punctuation Part 2, colons. Use a colon after a statement that introduces an explanation, restatement, or amplification of that statement. So the statement needs to be a complete statement. Do not use a colon after a sentence fragment. So for example, there was only one way to solve the mystery. That's a complete statement. That's an independent clause. We can pop that colon after that, and then we can go on to say more. There was only one way to solve the mystery, colon. We had to find the missing letter. Okay, so we had to find the missing letter. Offers an additional explanation or amplification of that initial statement. And the same is the case for this next one. The editor was correct in her prediction, colon. Well, now we're getting an explanation of her statement, an amplification. The novel would be a bestseller. So there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, unless you have a style guide that suggests a different interpretation of it, the vast majority of the time you are going to use a colon after a complete statement, an independent clause. Use a colon after a clause that introduces a formal list. Do not use a colon unless the words preceding the list form a complete statement. So here's an example. The poets I like best are these, colon, Warsan Shire, Wendell Berry, and Mary Oliver. There's our list. Okay, it starts with a complete statement and then we follow that with a colon. What some people do, and this is not correct, is they will do something like this. The poets I like best are. Okay, we're halfway through that sentence there and we're popping in a colon. That's not how we use colons. You'll also see something like this. I like many poets, such as, colon. That's not correct either. If you're going to use such as, follow it right away with the list rather than a colon. You don't need a colon there. And the same goes for this. The poets I like best are Warsan Shire, Wendell Berry, and Mary Oliver. That's correct without a colon. So in that case, what we're doing is we're incorporating the list directly into the sentence. And the same would be the case if we said something like, I like many poets, such as Warsan Shire, Wendell Berry, and Mary Oliver. No colon. Use a colon to introduce a quotation. Okay, so this is great if you're trying to mix it up, or if you have a very formal quotation, like you might find in academic writing, or if you're not using dialogue tags, this works really well. Again, you need a complete statement before the colon. You need an independent clause. So my mother's favorite quote is from Shakespeare, colon. We could put a period there, but we're not. We're going to put a colon because we're using that sentence to introduce a quotation. This above all to thine own self be true. And the same goes for the last example as well. So you can do this in your academic writing too. And I suspect you could use it in various public relations applications as well. Do make sure that you check the style guide that you're using, but generally speaking, if you have an independent clause or a complete statement, and there are some conventions that go with the use of the colon, then you're okay. Then you use a colon and then you follow it with whatever. So there's a few other uses for colons. We use colons to separate titles and subtitles, chapters and verses of biblical citations, and hours and minutes. So for example, what big teeth you have, colon, an educational approach to wolf conservation. I thought that was a great title. It was my daughter's thesis, actually. So we see this colon used this way in a lot of academic writing. Matthew 5:17, typical identification of chapter and verse of a biblical citation. And then 6 p.m., we see the colon used in this kind of articulation of time. Now, in the past, colons were used a lot in formal salutations. The age of email has kind of changed this. So you probably wouldn't say, "Dear Sir, colon." But if you were addressing a letter or an email to someone in a really formal situation, you might use something like Mr. whoever it is, and use a colon after that. So, "Dear Mr. whoever it is, colon." We do still, in some situations, use those kinds of designations, Mr., Ms., Doctor, those kinds of designations. Those haven't completely gone out of fashion, although we use them less than we used to. So usually a salutation will be followed with a comma, but if you want to add that extra element of formality, then you might follow it with a colon.